podcast. Life is a hideous thing.
Over time, things change. Others will always remain the same. As one approaches the crossroads, cast aside the advice from friends or foe. Always, to thine own self be true. While patiently waiting for artificial intelligence to fully take over, be happy to create your own luck.
And beware the envious eye. And beware the envious eye. And beware the envious eye. And beware the envious eye.
I'd like to introduce William Simpson to Life is a Hideous Thing podcast. Do you prefer William or Will?
It really doesn't matter because it's just one of those things that I was born William and I've been called Will for so long as a shortened version. And when I'm at home, I'm called William. And when I'm out with my friends, they seem to call me Will. And then there's those other bastards that call me other names. So, take your choice.
The only person that calls me David is my mum when I'm being naughty. But
I'm sure that's very often.
Well, when she can get round to calling me. But thanks for doing this, Will. I know you're very, very busy.
I'm fine.
How's it going?
Yes, I actually had a really nice weekend. A couple of friends had sent me over a couple of bottles of wine from France, which was really nice after a convention. And they said, "Oh, I must try this." So I spent the weekend drinking my couple of bottles of wine and doing a little bit of drawing for myself and just chilling out, really.
Is that your predominant thing now?
What, drinking wine?
Well,
no, but it's always nice when it happens.
I mean, like drawing.
Sorry.
No, it's
yes.
fine. It's fine. I know drinking's a big deal.
Jesus Christ, no. I won't ever give you that idea. The thing is, it's like an everyday thing. I mean, a lot of people have always asked me about artwork, and they talk about your job, which is artwork, and then they ask you about what do you do in your spare time, and they seem dumbstruck whenever you say, well, actually, I draw. And, I paint, I draw, I get on with the other projects that I have. And it's kind of like, this is the thing that you think art. You don't just stop because the job's over, if you know what I mean. You actually, the job is a bonus. you would have been drawing anyway.
Yeah, because now I've left the music biz. I was in the music biz for 25 years. And now I've left, I seem to have a massive aversion to going to gigs and listening to people's demos and anything to do with it. I'm just like, I don't know, maybe it'll wane a little bit and I'll become more gentle with that. I don't know.
But what about your own stuff? I mean, would you not sit and compose your own stuff?
I play guitar to myself, but I wouldn't ever listen to anything I've ever recorded. It's fucking terrible. You always have that massive distaste for your own voice. That's the big thing doing this. And I think sometimes when I've done a podcast and it's very like, it's like a chat, but a lot of the people I do it with, I don't think ever listen back to it because they just can't stand their own voice.
A lot of us are used to our own voice because we talk to ourselves.
Well, true, but I did a bit of research in why people don't like the sound of their own voice recorded, because it sounds different in your own head.
Yeah.
I think that was the first step to doing this, was can I stand my own voice? Once I got used to it, it's just like a bandwidth to me now. I don't really listen to it as my voice. I just listen to it as a I don't know, a noise.
Well, I get kind of used to it over the years with, there's been a lot of interviews at different times and you got to go in there and just start talking. So, you sometimes hear some of them back, and if it hasn't gone too badly, then you're okay.
You don't have a problem with it then, listening to your own voice in?
I mean, it's like looking at myself, it's the same thing. Accept it.
Yeah, I can't seem to do that either. I've just recently grew a beard, and people say, like...
Every mirror in your house?
Yeah, basically just don't look in the mirror, and it happens without any effort.
Jesus.
You know what I mean? It's like people are like, oh, that's cool. I'm thinking, well, I made no effort in doing that. It just grew out my face. Just don't look. You know, and you would have probably laughed if you'd have seen me like 10 minutes ago. I was like trimming it in the mirror, like, oh, it's touching the microphone, so it crackles. So I'm trimming my beard in the mirror, so I've got a big chunk missing now.
What, microphone shaped?
Yeah, just in front of my mouth. It's like, it seems to be prevalent with like guys between 22 and 28, and they want to look about 38, and it's like, dude, why are you doing that?
Absolutely, absolutely. It seems like a crazy thing.
When you get to 38, you're going to look fucking 50, so chill out. Why are you speeding it up? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Oh shit!
I think it's to trick women into thinking that they're more suave.
Oh, I don't know. They're all like lumberjacks.
Mm.
Yeah, lumberjack people.
That hipster look.
Yeah, drive around big trucks and.
So obviously you know this, but when I started chatting to you on when was it, Wednesday last week?
Right.
And we nearly ended up recording straight off the bat. I was like the most unprepared person ever. And
that would have worked fine.
I thought the dynamic would have been weird. Not bad, just a bit weird, you know. And since then I've not watched all of Game of Thrones, don't worry. I'm probably the only person you've ever spoken to that's never seen it, right?
Oh, no. I've got a friend that fast forwards through it to the interesting bits.
So, as a layperson to Game of Thrones, you got to sell it to me. What is the interesting bits?
Oh my goodness, the whole thing's interesting. What can I say to you? It's a Machiavellian, incredibly oh my god, on the edge kind of fantasy thing, and it's less fantasy than it is a pseudo medieval reality. I mean, a lot of people believe it. You know, there's a sense of it being our history, as opposed to it actually being a fantasy world that just happens to feel like a version of our history. And then you're wondering where the dragons were kept, you know?
Because it looks, I mean, what I've seen, and I must admit, I saw like half an episode maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't the first one. It was like season 3, I guess. I don't know, just in the middle. It was on telly. I was like, there's a little dwarf guy, and then a dragon, and loads of birds in it, and I was like, what the fuck? You know, I didn't really follow what was going on. It looked very good, but
it is very good, yeah. I mean, there's high production values and everything. It's one of those things that it looks like mini films on television, you know.
Yeah, and then as I was doing the research on the show, I realised that a band that we played a couple of shows with in America, Mastodon, they ended up in the show.
You're kidding?
Yeah, they've got like a cameo appearance. I think they get killed. I've not seen it, but they were just chatting about it. Like, oh, we did Game of Thrones, and it was like fucking cool, man. And we were like, I was like, no way. And we've done a lot of shows with them guys. They're really nice guys.
Yeah, because there's definitely there tends to be quite a few musicians end up getting asked around set. You know, I think they hand out some very nice free tickets to go to concerts. So it's kind of cool when they come and they have a look at the sets and they get very enthusiastic, and then. Some of our people end up with tickets. That's okay. I just happen to be sitting in my box, so I end up not getting tickets.
Have you not got a cameo role in it yet?
No. I've just drawn lots of other people.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it'd be good, wouldn't it, actually? Yeah, if I had some magnificent death, it would be fantastic.
Well, you're the guy who's interpreting the story, so you could maybe draw it. So
I'd draw myself into it, yeah. And the guys go, after they shot it, they'd go, hey, that guy looks a lot like Will.
Or you could just lie and just say you look like Arnie from like Conan or something, and like, yeah, check me out.
That's a big stretch. So even Arnie from Kindergarten Cop is a big stretch.
Well, I don't work out at all. I've never done any gym kind of thing. My older brother was training to be a bodybuilder when he was young, and I sort of visual, you know, I saw him do it, and it was very strange. The diet and the shaving your whole body and oiling it up and looking in the mirror a lot and getting ready. It was very odd, very alien to me.
Serious dedication, that is.
I think so. You had to be very focused because everybody just took the piss out of you.
That's terrible.
You got these like very tiny little pants on, and you're built like fucking, like an Iron Man. It's like you look ridiculous, man. But I guess they don't see it like that. It's a competition for them.
No, but if he wore the Iron Man suit, he'd probably be fantastic.
Well, yeah. I've only ever seen one Iron Man too, if I'm going to admit things now.
Yeah. Oh, which one was it?
The first one, I think.
That's the best one.
Right, and I think that's why I've not seen the rest. You seem like a big moviegoer.
Oh yeah, God, yeah. I mean, you see, again, it's one of those things that the influences in my art life tended to be very cinematic. Anyway, I grew up watching films. there used to be a great sort of Saturday afternoon thing with films, and I would sit watching movies and drawing pictures, and then I would stay up really late watching movies and drawing pictures, and it just seemed to be the thing that I did, you know.
So have you got a top favourite film?
No, I mean that would just I never understand how people can have only one, you know, sort of movie. I mean, I've got batches of movies from different things, but I mean, there's no one favorite, you know.
You might have seen on my blog I got like my top 10 films.
Oh, have you? I didn't see that.
But it's from a list I did of 100.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's not in any general order. It's ones I can remember that I've seen actually.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and there's some films that I've seen that never make it on there. But obviously, being in the band, you get interviewed and people are like, "What's your favourite film?" And you think, you know what, I can't actually remember.
Aired list. Yeah.
So I think one day I was bored and I wrote down the 100 films, which is expanding, I guess, because I do actually, still enjoy films that I watch. It's just I won't watch trash.
Oh, you see, that's the difference then, because I've got a very high tolerance level for rubbish. My friends over here, I've got a whole bunch of friends that are critics, and they are so disparaging over every damn film that comes out. And I'm on a press list, and I get to go and see a lot of movies. And the thing is that there's so many of them that I enjoy for what they are. I mean, you know they're going to be rubbish when you go to see them. But as long as they fulfill the rubbish quality that they're meant to be, then that's okay. You know, you weren't expecting anything else. I just hate it when I go to a movie that's meant to be a thing and turns out to be something completely different and it's not good.
I think I recently did that. We went to see a film called Monsters, and I didn't realise it was the second one in the series already. I don't know. It wasn't about monsters. It was about completely something else with monsters in the background that didn't have anything to do with the film, and it was very disappointing because I think CGI has come on a lot. Me being a purist from the 70s, I was always into films that were kind of made with models and stuff, sort of Ray Harryhausen, stop motion. And now I had a big issue with CGI, but I think the CGI is actually better now than the dialogue and the acting and the casting and all that. It's just that's all seems to have fallen by the wayside now. It's just CGI.
It's a major problem, isn't it? Because if you end up with something that's got a huge budget, it tends to also have a vast amount of CGI. And the thing is that doesn't necessarily make a good film. In fact, I mean, you think about it. Okay, here's a classic. The original Matrix movie was a phenomenal piece of work because it was pretty much mostly actors doing their thing, and they were using wires to move people around and stuff, and they had that incredible kind of bullet time camera. But then the other two were a disaster because it was so much CGI. But the minute you see it as CGI, you lose that sense of any kind of jeopardy for any character because you can see when they turn from wooden acting into rubber acting and then back out again. So it's a bit of a pain. And I mean, I always like it when the CGI is something that is there, but you don't notice it so much. It's like a moment that enhances something rather than takes over from being the thing that you're looking at. And I think that's going back to Game of Thrones there. I think it's one of the reasons why it works on TV, because certainly the guys doing the vis effects on it are doing a bloody good job. I mean, it's really good CGI, and it's not overused. It's used when it's really necessary, and a lot of the stuff is background replacement and stuff like that.
That was the dynamic of the podcast with you, was that I wasn't going to watch it because obviously we were kind of playing it day by day, and there was no way I was going to watch 50 hours of something. I would have maybe got eight hours into it, and I don't think it would have made much difference.
Certainly not. Yeah.
So I thought, I'll just hold off and I'll just chat to Will about. I always do this. It's like a general conversation as opposed to an interview. I don't particularly want to buy your new book and see your new movie and
just as well because I haven't made them. I haven't put yet. That would be terrible.
You don't have a book out? I mean, like you don't have in the past. There was like a book of sketches you did.
No. There's loads of. There's loads of reprint stuff that's out now because they reprinted a lot of the Judge Dredd stuff that I did recently. They reprinted the Transformers books that I did. The DC are always reprinting Hellblazer and Vamps. So the thing is, the stuff does keep coming out in some country, and that's kind of nice. I mean, the problem has been, of course, since I've been working on a lot more film work, my print side of things has shrunk an awful lot. There's not so much of it. Certainly not new stuff out. There are new things that people just haven't seen because they've been a little bit more localized, or they've been parts of anthology books, that I've done, a short story in or something, which is one of the reasons I kind of got on with 6-part comic strip of my own. It could, because people just assume that you don't do comics anymore. But the thing is, I love comics. I mean, I've always loved comic work, and so it's one of the things I do at night when I get home is work more on my 6-part comic book, just to gradually get the damn thing finished. I'm issue 4 at the moment. I'm working my way through. I have 2 more issues after that, and then we'll publish. And the thing is, it's cool because when you're doing storyboarding, you tend to get away from finished artwork, because storyboarding is like the roughs that you do for your comic pages. It's like the layouts, really. If that was all I did, I think I would go bonkers because, I a lot of the time I'll go home at night and I'll work on illustration work of my own just for projects that I'm doing, or else I'll be painting. And over weekends and stuff, I end up painting stuff or drawing parts of other projects. So it's, I have to do finished artwork because, that's what I am fundamentally. It's like artist first, storyboard guy second, conceptual stuff third, whatever. It's all part and parcel of what I do.
How do you find that? Obviously you're well known now because of the show, but as a storyboarder, it's not something that people really look at. They look at the director and the main actor, and the guy who wrote the story, and then the editor, and maybe, and the music and all that. You're like an in-between guy that's personally feel very, very important. In fact, probably one of the elements that bring it all together, but you don't seem to get that ego sort of position where, you know what I mean? Like people they don't know you, but they do now because of the conventions.
No, but the thing is, you see, before I had all that with comic books. I was pretty well known in comic circles. When I worked in 2000 AD, I was really well known in the UK for the 2000 AD work, and then over in Europe for that. And then I'm in the States when I did, Hellblazer and Vamps, and I did a bit of Batman, and I did Aliens for Dark Horse, and it's like they were all pretty well known as well. And so the thing was, you did have a reputation of sorts, and you did have a fan base of sorts back then. And when I started doing film work, everybody thought, it wasn't so much that you disappeared as they just assumed you died because because you weren't actually producing any more comic work as far as they could see. But the fact was, you were actually working away probably harder than you'd done, for a lot of years on movies and TV stuff. So the funny thing is, I've been doing a lot of film work for years, which, again, people didn't really realize it was the same person. Game of Thrones, because it's such a popular show, meant that I got invites to, more conventions and events. And it was only then, because people wanted to see a selection of your artwork, that you would put up the artwork, and they would see the Game of Thrones stuff, and they'd also then see the other stuff that you'd done, and suddenly realize, oh my God, it's the same person.
How do you find the convention thing?
I don't mind them. I always enjoyed going to conventions because I was hanging out with friends that you just didn't see. It's a very solitary existence, artwork. You spend a lot of the time in your own box, basically just drawing away, and you go out occasionally, have coffees, meet the odd few people, and then you go back to your box. But conventions were always that thing where every artist who had spent half a year in their own place went out and suddenly met all their friends, and they turned into mayhem. But that was when there was only maybe 2 conventions in a year. Now there's a convention every weekend.
I've noticed that it's a very popular sort of phenomenon.
It's a weird phenomenon now, yeah, because it's certainly not all about comic artwork.
Well, every aspect of the business, I guess. It's very interesting to people how things are put together. So you kind of do get, not famous, but you can have that outlet of going to signings, having your picture taken. And maybe you could help me with this. It's like a destroying of my own ego, and a battle with the self. Where I was famous. I never wanted to be. It just happened.
Oh, it happened. That's the thing. It's just something that happens. Yeah. And do you not find, though, that in your own head, it's like you're just doing the thing that you have to do, and you know, you spend all the time doing it anyway. And the thing is, you're aware mostly of all the mistakes you do. I mean, that was all I ever found was, I mean, people would come along and talk to me about comic strips that I'd done and artwork that I'd done and so on. And loads of people, well, they'd always be pretty complimentary. They seemed to always, you know, because that's the only reason they would talk to you, because they wanted to talk to you about the good aspects. And it was always very confusing because in your own mind, all you could see was all the things that you'd done wrong. And, you know, every job you did, you were trying to do better than the one you'd done before. And, you know, the challenge was not only for you against yourself, but it's you against everybody else as well. I mean, you get completely demoralized when you look at other artists' brilliant artwork, you know.
Have you ever felt like you've burnt out before and then sort of had to take a break? Because from doing a bit of research over the weekend, I sort of got the impression that your career's sort of taken a steady incline to this point, which is nice because a lot of people get
Is that an upward incline?
Yes, of course. Well, if it wasn't, I mean,
that's right. You didn't say decline. Okay, that's all right.
I think you might have had some up and down points where, you know, you get into a job and then the scene changes and the comic goes down. You know, like I think it was Toxic. Maybe if that stopped.
Yeah.
You were working on that. Did that Sex Warrior ever get finished?
I think it did. I mean, certainly not with me. The thing was, you see that there's a big Sex Warrior was a pain in the neck because we basically weren't getting paid. It started off that you know, you were into it and trying to do some really good work, and partway through it you realized, wait a minute, where's my actual paycheck? And it wasn't actually coming through. And there was a certain point where you realize, wait a minute, I'm meant to be living on this money that I'm meant to be getting, and there isn't any. And I remember a wonderful occasion when about 12 of us, who all had realized that we all hadn't been being paid, decided to pay a visit to the corporate center that was the Toxic offices. That was a very interesting occasion. I mean, you know, Pat Mills was there. I was there. There was a couple of other guys that were quite well known, and then lots of the other artists who were just starting off and writers. You know, and it was one of those. It was such a weird thing to go in and demand your money.
I think in the music biz we're still experiencing that because now I'm out of the biz. I still have to have some sort of, you know, connection with it because I have to keep bringing up these people that I haven't elected to work with, but they've got control over your royalties.
Yes.
Because they've got your money and they make you feel like you got to beg for it.
See, that's crap. I mean, that's,
you
like,
know, it's beyond going to their offices. You're pretty helpless. You can't really make them send you the check. You just got to be nice and pray and beg and email them every 2 weeks saying, hello, you know, I know the money's in there months ago, but what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean? And it's like I don't rely on that, but it is your money.
I've got friends over here that my friend Liz Lavery runs a music organization called On Music, who basically goes and chases up the royalties and stuff for artists and you know, musicians and also tries to, you know, helps to promote the music into film and stuff. So she's in a very interesting place with her company because, you know, it's constantly, you know, any music at all that's used anywhere, you know, tends to, well, it always has to be, you've got to find out the legitimacy of who actually is the copyright owner and who gets paid.
Are you into music much?
I do like my music, yeah. Why are you asking?
I don't know. I mean, it's like some of the people I'm in, you know, like chatting to are very into music and they go to shows and that's how I've met them.
Yeah.
And some people are just like, no fucking way, man. You know, they're just not into it at all. I'm not on about particularly like metal. That's the kind of background I'm from.
But that's fantastic. I mean, my friend Nicole over here used to run a metal mag called Molten, and I remember going to the launch night of Molten, which was, oh my god, it was 4 really, really heavy metal bands, you know, I think maybe death metal and some other stuff, and it was remarkable for the music side of it. I couldn't absolutely at all understand a damn thing that was being screamed at me, but the music was fantastic, and I got a lot of photographs. So it's like, you know, I do love the events, and I mean, I've always loved small clubs. I've always loved going to, you know, music events and in tiny clubs and stuff like that. It's much more interesting.
I should look up the club that I played in Belfast.
Or something, because the Limelight's been there forever.
It might be. I could look it up and let you know.
Yeah.
It's 1999 or 2000 when I played there.
Yeah, but I mean, I take it was it a small club?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the Limelight was the real rock club here in Belfast. It still is. It's still blasting away there. I mean, it does a lot of metal stuff, and it also, it has. If it's not its local heavy bands, it tends to have a lot of artists coming over that, maybe their career has gone into the. It's not the big stadium thing anymore, but they're still doing the circuit, and they end up. The Limelight gets all sorts of acts. I think Primal Scream I saw there last year. I think it was.
So I just opened the file.
Yeah.
And I looked in. It says 11th of September, which is strange.
Right.
September 11th, Belfast ? Which means I can't remember that there's no record of the club.
There's no record at all.
No, the next day we played in Dublin.
Yeah.
And
do you know where you played in Dublin?
Yeah.
Where?
It's Eamon Doran's.
Eamon Doran's.
Eamon Doran's, yeah.
I saw the Fun Loving Criminals there.
Wow, and there's even the list of the bands that were playing, but Belfast is just a question mark.
Yeah, it's got to be the Limelight. It really is.
I think so. I mean, That's the thing, is if you don't have a sort of a backstage pass from back then, or you don't, because you think everything would be put online now, all the records of like the posters and stuff, but it's not. It's quite hard to find where you were on that particular day. I've tried to do it. The list is quite long now. It's about 1,000 gigs.
God, man, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I've not been doing it for a couple of years now. I've given up. So.
What made you give up? Come on, I thought old rockers never died.
We had a fight.
Oh well, that always does it. Yeah.
You have a fist fight, and things get said, and you just think, I can't do this anymore. The band's getting less popular, so you sort of on a decline as well. It's like you just think, you know what, I need a break for the rest of my life. And this is where I was going with the ego thing, is that a lot of people think I shouldn't talk about what I do now because I've obviously given up this famous life, sort of privileged position. And now I just work as a chef. I can edit this out, so I don't have to. I'm just talking to you. But you know what I mean? I might not do. I mean, I think it's fine. If I don't have a problem with it.
Chef? That's pretty cool.
But if I don't have a problem with it, why should anybody else?
Yeah, well, that is the point.
If I don't have that problem with being honest, and
but you see, this again comes down to the reason why you do something, doesn't it? I mean, if I was doing artwork on the basis of either how much money I was making, or who actually knew what my work was. I mean, I would probably be locked in a cupboard somewhere crying my eyes out because of the fact that nobody knew that I existed. But the fact is, you do it for all sorts of reasons. I mean, as I said, I started off painting in fields, doing landscapes, and I was driving around the coast the other day, and I was thinking, God, it'd be nice to get out and get the easel out and actually start painting again.
I think we might have started in a similar position where you were doing a fanzine of your own.
That's right. Why were you? Have you done?
Yeah, I did. When I first started my first band, I was 18, and we couldn't get any write-ups for your record or your first demo or something. So we just thought, you know what, we'll write our own fanzine and just write a review that's positive in there. It was a bit of a cheat, but it worked. And I ended up getting, because I was doing all the layout and the artwork and everything inside, it was quite intricate. I ended up getting a job as a graphic designer in a record company.
Which is wonderful. That's good fun.
And that lasted for 4 years. And a lot of these records that I worked on are now deemed as classics, and they're worth a lot of money on eBay. Wow. And that's how I got to work with Dave McKean, Duncan Fegredo, lots of other sort of Kev Walker. And their careers were all just starting out too. So it was very kind of cool. I've gone back and talked to a lot of them. Yeah. They can't remember anything.
Well, they're all doing brilliantly well. I mean, those guys, their work's everywhere.
His work's fantastic. And I've noticed that, you know what, Will, the line artwork that you've just referred to about, it's not as developed as painting, but some of the line artwork that you're doing recently, I absolutely love.
All right, cool, man.
I don't know why, because it's, I don't know, it's like listening to a band's demo. It's kind of you don't ever see that bit. And I find it fascinating. I think kids would find that more inspirational than, say, looking at a Frank Frazetta painting that's finished.
Well, I have to say, looking at some of those Rosettas, nah, they'd still get a lot more
I,
buzz out of that. There's some brilliant, brilliant stuff. But no, it's funny. If it's, you see, a lot of the pencil stuff that I've been doing as finished, that's as far as I'm ever going to go with it, has been artwork that, it serves its own purpose. It's stuff that I do for me, and I do it now as something that I want to draw. I want to, and that's it. It goes through whatever process I'm going through in my head, and it's actually so much better and more real to me than anything else that I've done. It's like you're knowing when to stop. That's fine. It doesn't matter if people can see the build-up of lines behind the line that you're choosing as the finished line. I mean, a lot of the work, you can see all the scribbles behind it. You can see the choices that are being made. It's really interesting. One of the exhibitions we had over here, there was a couple of my images blowing up from it being A3 size, to being, it was like about 5 foot wide, and I spent so much time looking at it just from the point of view of all of the lines that were in the piece of work, all of the extra decisions that were being made, and it still looked really nice blowing up to that size. In fact, it looked more interesting, and I was discovering things about my own work when I was looking at it.
that's maybe where I can recognise, because I started out my career as a painter,
Yeah.
and I realised I was shit at it, so I started drinking and ended up in a band. And that is one of the biggest attributes about music, is you just got to be able to handle the booze, and be cool. But
Cool.
I've got a little list of artists that I used to like when I was growing up, and I was wondering if you might have been influenced by them. So I'll just say the names, and then you can say yes or no. So Geiger.
Well, okay, let's not do the yes or no. Let's just Geiger. You see, Geiger was. I would have been doing a bit of artwork before I ever saw Geiger's stuff. But I remember when I first saw Alien, and that did blow me away. And then I saw. I managed to get a hold of a book that was. I think it was called Geiger's Alien or something.
That's right.
And it was a beautiful piece of work with all the ideas that he'd been putting out into the stuff. And the thing is, that instantly influenced Monsters that you did. It instantly, you could not get away from that. Once, you'd seen Geiger, you could not have seen Geiger. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it was like embedded in your head, so that anytime you had creatures to do, there was a tendency for that influence to come across. But again, it only came across if it fitted the kind of artwork that you were doing, which was why it was really nice eventually when I did Aliens, to do a 4-issue series and actually have my own covers to do, because then you were actually responding to all the Geiger stuff that you'd seen and trying to do it your own way, something a little bit different. But it was Geiger stuff is stunning. It's still stunning. I mean, I look at his stuff every now and again, and very, very sick of mind, but fantastic artwork.
I think one of the biggest things about him is when you look at the picture, you're still blown away.
Yeah.
And then you look at the date, and it's like 1973. You think,
oh my God, yeah.
Fucking hell, really?
Did you watch that documentary about Jodorowsky's Dune? And the amazing collection of people that he'd got together to work on that. I mean, Mobius and Geiger and Chris Foss. So he had Foss to do the spaceships, and Mobius was doing the storyboards. Geiger was brought in to do these strange kind of otherworldly things. And so much of what was proposed in that film that never made it to screen ended up because Jodorowsky had done this massive book that had gone. There was about 15 of them or something, it said, in existence, that had gone around the studios in America. So whenever the Dune proposal kind of never made it through, the ideas were still roaming around, and they ended up in all these other films. So you start to see, there's bits of Star Wars came from the Mobius work that was in the Dune stuff. You saw that Geiger stuff, of course, went on to be Ridley Scott's, Alien. And Chris Foss, of course, had gone on to do lots of work and stuff like that as well. So you were watching the dissemination of these great ideas into a whole load of other projects. It's fascinating. You got to see that documentary.
I read it recently, and it was about his distaste of working with Hollywood. He fucking hated them because he kept smashing his sets up and rebuilding them, and he was like, "Dude,
that's Hollywood. Come on."
I designed 7 sets, and there's like, I didn't mean you to just build one and then trash it and turn it upside down and do it again. He had massive artistic issues with how the process was done to save money, I guess, and that's part of it, I guess. And mentioning Star Wars, was Ralph McQuarrie ever on the radar for you when you were younger?
Absolutely not. I don't. I'm sorry, but I don't even know Ralph. Ooh, that's really bad, isn't it?
Well, he's kind of had a similar line of work that you've got now, where he was painting, say, an image that was explained to him by Lucas, I guess, and he'd paint an Attack Walker or a scene,
Oh, right.
and then it'd end up in the film.
There's loads and loads and loads of people in the film business that I just don't know. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've got my little corner of Northern Ireland that I work out of most of the time, and occasionally I get to work other places. But I meet people through the jobs that I'm on. So the thing is, if you're not moving around internationally all the time, there's a tendency to miss characters that are working in some of your favorite things. People like Norman Rockwell. I know Norman Rockwell's stuff. I know Frazetta's stuff. I know Mobius's stuff. Jean Giraud. I know Bilal, and I know Milo Manara's amazing work, and Liberatori that used to do Rank Xerox. Crazy mad stuff. There's all of the brilliant British artists. There's Gary Leach, and there's Dave Gibbons, and there's Brian Bolland, and Mike McMahon, and Brendan McCarthy. There's so many brilliant people. Don Lawrence was one of the first artists whose work made me realize what comic strips could be, because I was so used to, when I was a little kid, and we got given the funnies, Dandy and Beano and stuff like that. And then you discovered, the war comics, the little commando books, and the war picture library stuff, which was meticulously drawn, lots of detail. Still black and white stuff, really, except, these brilliant covers. And then I remember when I found the Trigon Empire in Look and Learn. This was Don Lawrence, 2 pages of Don Lawrence every week. It was stunning. It's fully painted artwork. And as a kid, you're looking at this, and this is before you discovered American comics. You've got this wealth of art that you're realizing is actually comic artwork, and that does change your perception, And then, of course, I ended up finding American comics. One of the first American artists I ever discovered was Gene Colan, who did Daredevil for like 100 issues or something. He was just the master of shadows. Beautiful artwork, horror artwork, just spooky film noir type artwork. And this is the basis for loads and loads of the comic influence, that you got. I remember when I discovered Will Eisner, and again, I was a young teenager, and I remember it was one of the Warren mags when Warren was doing the reprints of The Spirit. And I remember seeing this stuff and thinking, wow, this is amazing artwork, not realizing it had been done in the 1940s, Yeah, I thought it was stuff that was being produced then, because it was so interesting and just a crazy style. Oh my God, it was beautiful stuff. And you're picking that up with Jack Kirby's Commandy and crazy stuff from DC Comics. It's just that you were always bombarded by a mass of different art styles, different artists, and sometimes, as I said, you didn't know who the artists were, but a lot of but you found out later. My mum considered, hey, I was doing artwork, so, that's brilliant, he could be like Leonardo or something. So the first 2 books I got were, she got me a Leonardo da Vinci book and a Michelangelo book, and this was, as a kid, I must have been about 10, and it was just this crazy stuff where to me, that was as interesting to me and as real to me as any of the comic work that I was looking at. It was like my mixture of influences were from all over the place.
Another one was Alan Lee.
Oh God, I loved Alan Lee stuff. I remember I got to see Alan Lee stuff because of Brian Froud's book on fairies.
Brian Froud's the next one on my list.
Oh man, those guys' work, I knew their work, because they had a couple of published books out there, and you were looking at the crazy, funny, quirky, bizarre style of Brian Froud, which really made you start looking at hedgerows, and then Alan Lee's stunningly romantic, watercolor paintings and his pencil drawings. Oh my God, that man's incredible.
I think I was overly exposed to Alan Lee because my best friend at school was in the Lord of the Rings fan club.
Oh, right. But weren't they great illustrations?
Yeah, it was very geeky, I guess. Back then, there was no exposure to Lord of the Rings like there is now.
Yeah.
So if you went into Lord of the Rings at school, like in the 80s, you were deemed as a bit of a weirdo. And Alan Lee was the major artist who was doing, every year he did a calendar and it came out available to the fan club.
That's the thing. His work. I mean, when you look at somebody that's influenced so much, I mean, of course, Alan ending up being the Lord of the Rings artist in a sense for the films is superb. You know, it just made sense.
I'm glad they kept him.
So am I. Yeah.
I can't remember who did that Ralph Bakshi cartoon of Lord of the Rings in the 80s.
Yeah, that's. I mean, funny. I was talking to those guys over in Florida this year. It was Ralph's son was there presenting the new version, the kind of cleaned up DVD version of. Oh, do you remember what was Fire and Ice that they did? With the Rosetta work in it. Absolutely beautiful.
When I remember watching that a lot as a kid and I loved it. And then when you sort of watch the movie,
Yeah.
I'm sure they must have used some of those as like a storyboard for it, because the angles of the cameras and
They definitely did. I mean, there was a lot of talk about that at the time because people were aware that that there was definitely things that had come straight from the animated version. But it doesn't matter. I mean, because my God, he did it so well.
I don't know why I loved that film, and it ended in like 2 minutes because they ran out of money. Which is interesting because I went back a few years looking at the old. You can buy them on eBay now, but it's like, what is it, Fantastic Films magazine?
Yeah.
And I was looking for a Star Wars one that talked about Boba Fett, and the sort of backstory about Boba Fett, which I remember as when I was very young. And so as proof to talk about this to my friends now, it's because it's very topical. Because of the film coming out, I was like, yeah, I think Boba Fett was meant to be a girl. And then at the back was an interview with Ralph Bakshi, who was talking then about the funding for the next film, which obviously never happened. This is like predating the actual, I guess, time when he got pulled. So it was a very interesting interview to read, like summer of 1980. Poor guy. I thought he did an excellent job.
I mean, it was certainly uniquely different in his time, and I mean, he's always pushed on and something new. I think they're actually doing a live action version of Fire and Ice.
Wow, cool.
That's the next thing coming out of Ralph Bakshi's studio.
It's come so far, because I remember he was doing that animated thing over actual footage of film, and it didn't really work. But you could see what he was kind of getting at, and now I guess that's like...
It's rotoscoping, and it worked in a very interesting way. But now you can actually see the kind of dating on it. It still looks beautiful. I mean, some of the stuff's amazing, but the crazy thing is that's really what computer CGI work is today.
It's just overlaying, yeah.
Absolutely.
The only other artist I was wanting to talk about, and it's because I'm trying to get him on the podcast, Rodney Matthews.
Oh yes, Jesus, he was good. Yeah, it was beautifully strange. There was a very strange kind of angular thing to his work, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was. Well, I look back at it, and it's very kind of unique for that time period, because now artists are very, like, I don't know, there's more dynamic to the poses and things. It was a lot different.
Like Roger Dean, and I remember buying those Yes albums not for the music but for the actual covers, because the big fold-out record covers were beautiful, and it took me years to actually listen to the albums. You know,
wow.
I was more into my Hendrix and stuff, and it was very, very different. And but the album covers were so beautiful. And then I got his amazing book. I think it was called, was it Views? And it was it was going into his building ideas as well, and his strange pod house that he built, as well as all of the stunning artwork. I remember a couple of my friends were over in England working on a job. It was a games job, a big new game that was being designed. And my friend Elaine Lee, who I worked with on Vamps, she was over because she was writing a lot of the thing. Mike Kaluta was over, who's, oh my God, tremendous artist.
Yeah.
Mike's one of the infamous studio guys, and he was over as well. So I went down to see them outside of Brighton, and Elaine had said to me it was in a castle. And I was just thinking, all right, it's probably a big old house. And when I got to it and went across the drawbridge,
wow.
Oh my God, this is in a castle. And I got invited in to come in and hang out and chat and see some of the stuff. And there's this huge, big, long table, real medieval style thing. I walked in and Elaine introduced me. Oh, you got to meet Roger, and it was Roger Dean at the end of
Wow.
the bloody table, and it was like I suddenly had walked into the land of gods, gods of artwork, gods of pop culture, and it was just fascinating, and I got shown around this incredible game. I mean, the artwork was incredible, but the game never happened, as far as I know. And all these guys had been put up in this castle for, I don't know, a couple of months working away on this thing.
But you don't play computer games?
No, I realized I got killed too much, and I drove into walls too much. The zombies really freaked me out. So in the end, my kids play it. I watch my kids play and stuff occasionally, but the fact that I would never get past the first level of anything kind of got really irritating after a while. And I mean, I just can't spend my time doing it. I've got too many things I want to draw, so it's like the idea of using up my time on a game where I have to actually be so immersed in it. It's just kind of slipped by me. I just like picking up my pencil and getting on with drawing.
So as 2015 is the sort of centenary of World War One, I was very curious what your grandparents were doing in the war, and I ask that to all my guests because it's like topical.
My grandparents. That's
Yeah.
in the First World War. Jesus, both my grandparents would have been. My grandfathers would have been farmers, and both the grandmothers would have been farmers' wives. Though my grandfather in the south of Ireland was something to do with. I don't know if it was the Royal Irish Constabulary or whatever the hell it was in those days, or whether it was a other kind of post office government type job or railways. Maybe it might have been railways. I don't know. There's something that he was connected to that was a uniform job. I just don't know which one it was. And the other grandfather was farmer, basically. So they had nothing to do with the war, although I had not uncles, great uncles that would have been, away over in World War One. I know more about the ones that were in World War Two. I had an uncle that was a rear gunner in Wellingtons, and survived his trips over Germany. So
I knew that Belfast had been bombed in the war by the
yeah.
Germans, but I found that a lot of people don't know that. And do you ever hear like many stories about what?
Oh yeah, because I mean, especially when I was growing up in Derry, I never heard anything really about what had happened in Belfast, and it was only whenever I moved up to Belfast that I started to hear more of the history of Belfast, and it became more interesting. But yeah, I mean, Belfast got pretty badly bombed over a couple of nights, and there was a lot of people killed. It was a major thing because, of course, of the shipyards and everything, and it was targeted then. But I only think it happened a couple of times. It wasn't something that was a regular occurrence because probably it was a little bit far for them to come and bomb.
There was 4 nights, I think it was 4 occasions that Belfast got bombed, and I think the first one was the worst. It killed like 900 people.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to make a phone call to my dad to find out what my grandparents did in World War One.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting to me because I've been talking to Pat Mills about Charlie's War and everything.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated to find my dad had a bit of a, I don't know, my dad's into history and he was digging up my sort of granddad's past.
But come on, I mean, whereabouts was that? Where was your area?
Yorkshire, near Leeds.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing was, I mean, Britain got heavily flipping damaged. I mean, heavily bombed over those years. And I mean, you think about, I mean, there's classic stories of the guys away off fighting over in Europe and coming back home to find that their whole street had gone and their family was all dead, and yet they'd been out there getting shot at and had survived. I mean, there's so many awful tales like that, where being at home wasn't safe.
I was swapping books with Lemmy.
Yeah.
from Motorhead.
Yeah.
Because he's very into World War Two, and the book he gave me was a modern book about Dresden. He was well into his history with Dresden, and the modern book was brilliant because it took in more aspects of sort of the politics and the Russian side, as opposed to just us flattening Germany because we didn't like Nazis. It was way more intricate than that. Apparently, we flattened Dresden to warn the Russians that we could actually do that.
Well, I mean, isn't there that amazing thing about whenever the Americans set off the second nuclear bomb, that it wasn't because it was serving any purpose against the Japanese because they'd already surrendered, but it was more to tell the Russians where we've got the will to do this.
Well, I think that was the same effect they had for Dresden, is that even though it's a few months before we've got the bomb, we can still do it.
Yeah.
And just watch. And they did it And I think the Russian front was only 50 miles away, so they would have got there like a week later and found complete ruins.
Have you been to Berlin?
I've travelled everywhere. I've been to Berlin lots of
Yeah,
times.
isn't it the most amazing place though, from the point of view of the fact that you're walking around something that is such an amazing sense of history in it, and well, also the fact that again the Germans coming to terms with with the Second World War, and it's fascinating talking to folks over there about this sort of stuff. I worked over in Studio Babelsberg one year when I was I was lucky enough to get on a movie that was happening out there, and it was over a Christmas period, so I had 4 weeks. And it was just the most amazing place to be going around, because, with everything, I mean, everything was covered in snow, but, it's like there's that amazing Jewish monument that's there in the center of Berlin. It's all the black slabs, the huge black stones. And, there's all these other things that you come across that like going up on the river at the back of the Reichstag, and the bullet holes that are still in the walls and stuff, all the things that are left. It just was, for me, it was remarkable. It was like you were actually wandering around a place that the history, we've seen so much of the history of that city on television, in films.
It's crazy that it only happened 70 years ago.
Oh my God,
It
yes.
seems like a completely other universe that could actually happen.
Humanity hasn't progressed that much whenever it's still actually actively allowing itself to get caught up in these situations, My mum's side of the family, a lot of them were off fighting in the war, so it's kind of interesting. Three brothers went off and fought. As I say, one was in the RAF as a rear gunner, and the other two were in the Fleet Air Arm. So those guys, it's just fascinating because they come from the south of Ireland.
Yeah, because I read the south of Ireland, obviously not being part of England, it was a neutral country, so they weren't.
It was more complicated than that because yes, as you say, it was supposed to be a neutral country, though Eamon de Valera, the president, let in U-boats into Dublin, and Churchill tried to get de Valera to stop this by offering him Northern Ireland, and de Valera wouldn't take it. His plan was to invade and take over Northern Ireland by force. But that didn't happen either, because once the Allies found out about it, they turned a bunch of guns and aimed them at the south of Ireland and basically said, if you come up that road, we're going to blast you. So very simple tactics. But but yes, Southern Ireland had its neutrality, and so many people went off and fought in the Second World War, and they weren't acknowledged for it until in recent times, because it was considered, in the south of Ireland, it was considered a really bad thing to do.
It's very interesting because none of that's written on Wikipedia.
No, it's not. And yet, I'm very proud of my uncles from Sligo, basically. A lot of those guys, they were tough, and they went off, and they figured it was the right thing to do, so they did it. As I say, there's a lot more of them from down south that went off and fought. And it always seems so strange because, my relatives in the north of Ireland who would talk a lot about Britishness and so on, but none of them were involved in the war. So that's bonkers.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. Yeah.
Well, it's it is one of those wonderful things about being in Ireland. Ireland is such a strange and interesting, flipping, mixed up place.
I'd love to come back. It's been.
Oh, you should. It's a different spot, and Belfast would look very, very different to you if you haven't been over here in a while.
But do you feel like that? Like your career's actually peaking now and going something like really because of Game of Thrones? I guess.
No. I never think of it like that at all. As I say, I'm drawing kind of the same as I always did. It's just in a different area, but I like the fact that it's ever changing. That's the point with it. HBO been fantastic. I've ended up because I've had lots of artwork that I did. A lot of concept stuff in the pilot stage and into the beginning of the first season. There's a lot of the concepts that I did then that have lasted into the show, which is fantastic. So the original, paintings for those things and a lot of the artwork that I drew have been able to be seen in exhibition. So because in a way there's another marketable kind of marketing device, I guess. I've been sent places. So, they sent me off to Bangkok for a Comic Con, and they sent me to Singapore and Malaysia to do
Wow.
events out there. And that was fantastic for me because, much as I'd always wanted to go places like that, it was one of those things that you'd always find a reason to stay at home and work. And so the nice thing is being sent out by HBO and doing it in HBO style is fantastic. And then you kind of have got a different identity for like a few days. You're suddenly a representative of something that you actually, thankfully, are enthusiastic about. It's easy to represent a program like Game of Thrones. It's I enjoy the TV series, and I enjoy the work that I get to do on it. And great bunch of directors that I work with, and it's just become something really nice to kind of have that extra added thing, as well as doing all the other work that you do. So because of that, what's been really good about this is that it's helped me get invites to a whole bunch of other kind of European conventions that I'd never done before. So that's been nice. That's the kind of big change with the artwork that I do. And I was a couple of weeks back, I was out in Nîmes in France and having a beautiful time there. And a couple of weeks before that, I was out in Thessaloniki in Greece, again, having a fantastic time over there. And these are the kind of really nice events that you get to go and do. And it's not about, selling stuff or what monetary deal you get out of something like that. It's actually just the sheer enjoyment of being somewhere completely different.
A nice position to be in.
Well, it's nice when it happens, yeah. But then again, I've had invites to go to a whole bunch of cities in England to do conventions, and again, some of them are places I'd never been, and they're great fun to go to. So I just love it. And again, the nice thing is, of course, that people are the people that come up to you at the events. There's a split between those that know your film work and your Game of Thrones work, and those that were coming because of the comic strips that you'd done.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool because people still remember, a lot of the stuff that you did.
I think the guy who was helping me with the research, Barry, he was very into your old Judge Dredd stuff.
Good man.
Yeah, he loved all that. He was
good lad.
he was sending me lots of pictures over from your earlier work, and I only had a limited time to do it, so thank God I had someone to help me.
Yeah, it's really nice.
But like two different angles I wanted to come from. One that me and Ryan sort of tapped on was that technology is a big part of what he does now.
Yeah.
And I came from a graphic design background where it's changed a lot from when I was laying out covers on the floor to now doing it in Photoshop. But I guess as a storyboarder, you need a pencil and a pad of paper, and from what I heard you say, 2 telephone books under your desk. It's pretty much the same.
That was the old days. I now have a drawing board.
But essentially, it's not. I mean, I guess there is a.
No, it's essentially the same. I mean, I get my photocopied sheets of paper that I have 4 frames on a page that I work on. I do the drawings A3 size, so that on an A3 sheet of paper, so that when I print them up, they tighten up. It's a good size for me to work on. You get a certain amount of detail into the work that you're doing. It gets the information across better, I think. And lots of my friends that are storyboarders will be using computer systems and storyboarding, I suppose, programs. For me, the bit of computer work that I do is scanning the artwork into the computer and in Photoshop, maybe moving some frames around and the odd bit of lettering. and that's actually the slowest part of doing it, because you end up spending so much time scanning, and the time that the scanner's doing its thing, and then putting them into TIFF files, and then from TIFF files into JPEGs and all that sort of stuff, because you're working through it. And suddenly I find that a big chunk of my day is gone if I'm doing that side of things, that I should actually be sitting down drawing.
I said to Ryan that the photocopier was, for me, the best invention ever. Because I could use it as an art tool where you could manipulate artwork to break it down in that very unique way.
Yeah.
I guess if you put it on a certain resolution and you photocopy something like lettering, for example, back in the day, you could photocopy it 20 times and it would break up very weirdly, and then you'd have a band logo.
Do you remember those brilliant books you used to get of Letraset?
Oh yeah, I had to work in Letraset. It was a nightmare.
But the thing was, a lot of the time, I know when I was doing Judge Dredd, I had the letter set catalog. I didn't necessarily buy the letter set, but I used the fonts, to do my own hand lettering into the background of things, so that there's a lot of hand lettered stuff in the back of Dread, where I would have done signs or things, not particularly brilliantly, but it was that wonderful thing that you spent the time looking through lettering, to find something that suited what it was that you wanted. I think a lot of that was because I spent a lot of time with Gary Leach, and Gary was, oh my God, that man's incredible. When people say to you that somebody has forgotten more than you ever knew, well, that was Gary. Gary's that guy. I mean, his graphic design head is incredible. I mean, he knows what colors to put beside what colors. He knows what kind of fonts to use at any particular time. He's just a flipping genius when it comes to graphics, and his artwork is stunning. It was amazing watching him doing stuff. And I remember when I first used to visit Gary's place, and his world was chaos. Everything about him was chaos. There's just piles of paper and models and toys and books and videos and everything, and old Chinese food that had been left from a couple of days before, and it's all lying about in his apartment. And he would be in the middle of the floor where he'd have cleaned a space. He'd have his wooden drawing board sitting in the middle of the floor, and on that drawing board he would have this beautiful piece of paper where he would be turning out the most incredible artwork you've ever seen, sitting cross-legged on the floor, when he had a perfectly good drawing table up beside him that he just wasn't using because it was covered in stuff. So he'd be in the middle of the floor. And I watched him do, there was a series called Warp Smiths that he did for A1 years ago, written by Alan Moore, and I watched him drawing some of those pages, inking some of those pages, and I'm just sitting there with my mouth open. It's just like, wow.
It just reminded me that, do you think they still publish those letter set catalogues?
I don't think so. Do you?
No, because I remember working from them a lot.
Yeah, they absolutely were brilliant things. I mean, because now, of course, on computer we've got so many different fonts. So you can just check up stuff, I suppose, on computer, can you?
I wish I had not the catalog, but they used to give you the poster as well, which is like a like an A1 poster of all the fonts.
Oh yeah, brilliant.
And so you'd look up, you'd be just inspired by looking down this list, going that's what it's called, and then you'd get it from Letraset. It's a bit difficult in Photoshop because even though you've got the long list and you can see what they roughly are.
Yeah.
You kind of got to apply it on the poster you're doing to make sure it's right, and I don't know, I don't seem to, the inspiration's not as good.
It must be great to have that information in your head, that whenever you're looking at something, you kind of know when it works.
Me and my friend used to remember the names of the fonts, and the Lord of the Rings font, there
was such a thing.
Yeah, it was a Lord of the Rings font. I think it was from the movie, and someone had developed the font, and then it was called something like Lothlorien or something. I'd have to call him and ask him. I bet he can't remember. But we could remember all his shit. I mean, it's pre-computers, so you had probably a lot more space in your mind to do. But the last angle I wanted to go for was when I was obviously a graphic designer for the record company. I was having to work with artists, and they didn't like me explaining the concept from the band of, like, they wanted a dragon on the front and blah 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 blah, and they were like, "Stop! I just don't want to. Just give me the title and the lyrics, and I'll figure it out myself." Now, You've obviously got books to go from, and do you have a lot of more input than that, or are you given the total freedom to? Because you can read a sort of description in the book about what you're doing, and then it comes to mind, and you can draw it. Is it easier?
No, because they don't storyboard from the book. We actually, it's all from the television scripts. So, and you're also storyboarding from a director's notes, a director's perspective. I go and sit down with the directors, and we draw a bunch of thumbnails. As any of the directors is explaining what it is that they want. And I'll sit there and I'll do the thumbnails of the specific images. They check out the thumbnails, they can see what I'm doing, and then they trust me to go away and get on with drawing the stuff up. And then they'll change their minds.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff I get the freedom to just go ahead and draw. On Game of Thrones, there's been a few sequences where basically the directors have been quite content for me to go and break it down, work it out. And then they obviously pick the stuff that they like out of that and use it. So it becomes quite interesting. I mean, there's so many different ways and different approaches that are taken by the different directors,
I think that the artists, the more I described to them and what I wanted, the worse the cover got.
I remember one time I had one to do for Claytown Troop, years and years ago, and I remember I was bought into Island Records in London, and the guy I was dealing with was very vague about pretty much everything, and nice guy, but just vague. I kind of realized that this is not going to get anywhere. And I said, look, should I talk to the band? And they thought that was the most amazing idea.
Wow.
so the guy put me in touch with the band, and the band and I had a Christian Rio and I had a big conversation over what it was that the guys wanted. And it all made sense. And I went away and roughed up some ideas and sent them over. They told me what they liked, and then I finished the artwork. So, that was all pretty straightforward and cool. That was good fun.
To finish on,
yeah.
Were you ever a Star Wars fan back in the day?
You see, it's weird. I think the guys that saw the original Star Wars film first in the cinema, there's quite a few people who did, and it just hooked them instantly. And I didn't see it in the cinema. It was one of those things that took me, I had to wait until it came out on video before I saw it. I saw The Empire Strikes Back in the cinema, and The Empire Strikes Back I thought was phenomenal. Amazing film. I guess I'd already watched the first Star Wars movie on video by that stage. At that time, I think because Star Trek had been the thing that had been on TV for so long, the Star Trek movies were probably more interesting at the time from the sense of what I was going to go and see. But because I'd seen so much of Star Trek, and then of course it went way off the rails and it was really hokey, and you realised how hokey it actually was. But it was interesting. I mean, I love the recent Star Trek movies. They've been fantastic. As I say, I really liked when I finally saw the first movie, and I mean, Han Solo was fantastic, and you kind of got straight into it, and it was really good. But I was never the insane fanatic fan that lots of my friends are that actually like Star Wars. So, I mean, for me, the first two films were very, very good. The Empire Strikes Back was brilliant. The third film, the goddamn teddy bears put me off. Those flipping, oh my God, the
Ewoks. Good lads.
And so many people love the Ewoks and things. But for me, it was like the third movie let me down a lot, because one, it had teddy bears in it, and the other thing was that Han Solo's brain seems to have fried in carbonite. Because when he came out, he was a lot slower mentally than he was before, and his kind of not understanding who Princess Leia actually was. He was so bloody slow in coming to realization that hey, she's not hanging out with Luke. It was like, oh my God! It was like, don't treat us like idiots here. And I was kind of disappointed with the Return of the Jedi. Then, whenever after all those years, when the next movie was coming up, The Phantom Menace, and I was kind of looking forward to it just because the clips that I'd seen, the visual effects looked beautiful at that time. But when I saw the movie, I just hated the kid. I wanted to kill him. It was like, okay, we know who this guy's going to be, and he's really obnoxious. So they should run over him with a flipping speeder and get rid of him. And then, the Darth Maul character was great, but they bumped him off. The Jedi were pretty kind of wooden at the time, and the worst thing was explaining the Force. It didn't need an explanation. It was really horrible when they start talking about, metachlorians, which sounds like some freaking, plant extract. And it was like, I got really so kind of depressed with all that. And I mean, I loved the pod race. I mean, it was fantastic. What was completely confused by what Jar Jar Binks was meant to be, and it wasn't what I was hoping for. And then when they did the second one with the god awful teenage version of Darth Vader, there was nothing appealing about this character at all, and you again wanted him to be taken out, because you were thinking if the Jedi were so aware, what the fuck were they doing with this crazy person who had no bloody sense and was egotistical and needed to be slapped. And again, so you went through the second movie having all of that weird crap going on. And I mean, there's some beautiful looking locations, and I guess in Italy and stuff. And Amidala was, really pretty, so that was nice. But then you end up with that. Again, there was some really ropey CGI in there as well. That just, you kind of came out of it thinking, oh no, they really let the ball go here. By the time the third one came along, again, it was just like, I love the kind of Vietnam battling kind of thing, with all of the stormtroopers. That was in the second one, wasn't it?
I must say, don't give me any spoilers on the first one because I've never seen it.
Oh man, there's no. What's the spoilers to give you? There's a really shitty kid in it.
It's only because my tour manager, because I like Star Wars, was like, "I bet you're going to go see that new film, aren't you?" I said,
Yeah.
I'll bet you money I don't," and I've still to this day never seen it.
Oh, no, well you've got to see it to depress yourself.
He
And
owes me £3.50.
But it's just no, it was so frustrating. And the funny thing is, right, there's 3 feature films to bring you from a child to the guy who has become Darth Vader. Now, you know the premise, you know exactly what's going to, that this kid is going to turn out to be Darth Vader, yet you don't like him any step of the way through the 3 films. Now, I was watching the TV series of Bates Motel. I don't know if you've bothered watching it, but the TV series of Bates Motel, about Norman Bates.
Yeah, I know.
We all know what Norman Bates is going to turn into because we've seen him in Psycho. And the crazy thing is, you're watching a really well-handled story about a kid who you're meant to be terrified of because of what he's going to turn into, but you actually have sympathies for him, and you've got all of these things that we should have been feeling for the Darth Vader character, and we never did.
Not very well developed.
Well, something wasn't well developed. Star Wars, I want to be brilliant. I want it to live up to everything that it should be and everything that I experienced in The Empire Strikes Back. So far, it hasn't.
I was going to say, that's where I'm going. Is what do you think about the new direction?
You see, I think Disney handling it. I just think they can't do any worse. I really am hoping that they end up turning. I mean, it'll be a thing. That'll be a universal picture for everybody to go and see. But I hope they turn out something that's just so worthwhile.
They can't really go wrong because
you hope not.
I'm a downer on it all because I'm 45 now, and I saw it first time when I was 7. It completely changed my life. But now I'm just like, yeah, are you sure?
See, for me,
sure?
The big thing was, I remember when I saw Alien, and when I saw Alien, I remember that coming out of that, having been freaked out of my head watching that thing. That was disturbing. And then I don't know how much later, whether it was 6 months later or whatever. I don't remember when it came out, but John Carpenter's The Thing, I remember coming out of that just thinking that was one of the best things I'd ever seen. It's still got that oddly B-movie feel. It was just one of the best things that John Carpenter had done. It's tough to come up with a completely new idea, but that's what I loved about The Thing. The Thing just was incredibly strange. And when you look at it still today, because it wasn't CGI, it was animatronics, it still freaks you out.
Yeah, it's quite gory.
Yes, it's incredibly gory.
Yeah, I think that's why I've been particularly holding off on Game of Thrones, because I will like it so much that I'll catch up to like wherever it's at within a week, and I'll be like desperate, and I won't want to wait a week for the next episode. I'm too impatient.
My son Christopher had avoided it for years. I mean, I've been working away on it, what's Dad doing? Oh, he's away down working on Game of Thrones again. And it was like, he seemed to have very little interest in it. And then, all his friends told him how good it was and stuff. And he finally sat down to watch, he figured he'd watch season 1. And this was just a couple of months back. And of course, he couldn't stop. And he'd got up to the end of the 4th season. He'd seen the 4th season on television, and the 5th season hadn't started at that stage. And he was coming over, you got to tell me what's happening. And I was like, I can't tell you what's happening. You've got to watch the series, And he said, oh, but. And it was actually really funny because his brother Connor had been in helping me a couple of times, doing some scanning work for me and stuff. And, I remember one day I was sitting working and I looked over, Connor had been scanning stuff, and he was sitting having a bite to eat and reading a script. And I said, what are you doing? He goes, I'm reading the script here.
Wow.
And I said, oh, wait a minute, you're not meant to read that. You don't need to read that, I said. And I said, no, you're sworn to secrecy. You do realize. And he went, yeah, he says, and he asked me about a particular character. And he said, I get this guy's quite important. He says to me, and I said, what makes you think that? He said, well, there's big posters in the wall outside. And I said, well, yeah, he is important. And Connor goes, I see. And I'm sitting going, Connor, don't say anything. You're not to talk about this. You can't tell anybody about this. And he didn't. And the day his brother was saying, you've got to tell me what happens at the end of season 5. You've got to tell me, you've got to tell me. And I said, I can't tell you. You know, there's no way I can tell you. I wouldn't tell you. And Connor's walking up the stairs and he turns around and goes, I know what happens.
Wow.
And he says, I ain't telling you either.
So do you have to keep them under lock and key now? I mean, not as a serious thing, but...
We are very good at not telling people anything. I mean, you know what, you know, I've been working on this now. This is my 7th year. So the thing is, you're very aware of what not to show, what you don't. I mean, when I go to conventions, I can talk about anything that's been seen, you know, on television. I can talk about any of the work that I've done on, you know, previous seasons. But there's no way I would even think of talking about the upcoming stuff. You know, you don't even hint at it. And when people ask, you know, I mean, because some idiot will always ask the question about, you know, what's going to happen to so and so, or what's happening next, or blah blah blah. You know, and I mean, at one stage it was kind of easy for me because you were able, you know, up until to the end of season 5, you were able to say, well, have you read the books? And most of the fans, of course, had read the books. So they said, well, then you know what happens. But the point was that, I mean, of course, you know, the TV series does take slight detours from the books and does, you know, amalgamate some characters, and it works. I think it works better for the TV series. You know, I mean, it's the wonderful thing about working on this season is, of course, this season is a deviation in some ways completely. I mean, our bosses, David and Dan, know exactly what's meant to happen with characters, because they talked to George Martin about it, but George hasn't written the books yet. So it's become an interesting place because we're just in this wonderful, you know, this whole new experience. So for the first time ever, we are actually ahead of the fans.
I guess what George might have to follow what you guys do now.
Well, you see, this is why I'm saying, I mean, Dave and Dan talked to him years ago, and I mean, they obviously know where he's intending to take the story. It's
like a guideline, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, this is only supposition. I mean, but I guess the thing is that it is that wonderful thing though, where we have no idea what's going to happen next. It's wonderful, you know. And everything I read, you know, as the scripts come through, it's all this fresh information because it's not being seen anywhere else. And it's why I think it's going to be a much more exciting season for the fans, because it's going to turn into the thing that they don't know about.
I can't wait to watch it now. Now I'm kind of free to do that.
Well, then you should.
Well, you know, when I was saying I was doing research for Dexter, and I ended up getting stuck on 8 seasons of researching that, and you just don't have enough hours in the day to do everything. Yeah. And 8 seasons is quite a large chunk of work. It was
excellent. I mean, it had some seasons where it was a bit hokey compared to other seasons, but overall the whole thing was fantastic, and I thought it was a phenomenal series. I mean, the season with John Lithgow was crazy.
Thank you for taking the time out to do it for me, Will. It was great.
And it's been great fun, actually. I've been quite content. I've been working away here, so.
I'd like to thank Will Simpson for taking the time out to do this, and the glorious Ryan Brown for helping me set this up, and also my good friend Barry Tiffin for last minute research help. Thanks for listening.